Hi, welcome to another riveting and exciting and sharing of the MICCI CRADLE Expert Hour, keeping businesses sharp and on the edge as we move towards the endemic phase and post-COVID recovery. Today, our topic is capitalizing on government grants and financing. My name is Sean Chia, the Executive Director for the Malaysian International Chamber of Commerce and Industry, keeping our members up to date and abreast of all matters that will make businesses forge ahead in this recovery period. And what most businesses are looking at now is the help that the government provides in keeping the economy going. Before we start, some housekeeping rules. Those that are watching or in the Zoom, you can leave your messages down on the chat, or those that is watching from Facebook, you can leave your messages and we will try to answer them as much as we can, right? Without further ado, we have Dr. Woon Yun Hong to be speaking today. She's the Executive Director for Tax at CRADLE, has been in the business of tax compliance, domestic and multinationals since 2003, advising multitudes of client-based, public, private, in various variety of industries. Okay, without further on, can I introduce you, Dr. Woon? Are you ready? The floor is over to you.
Yes, Sean. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, can see my screen, right, Sean? Yep. Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is very great for me today to have this opportunity to share with you about the government grant. Okay. Before we start, let me share with you on some of the benefits about grant. As usual, let's say for a new business entity, we normally would think about whether we should consider the taxability of the income to be generated, the deductibility of the expenses to be incurred, or any relevant tax incentive the business entity can apply. And the last but not least, please also consider government grant, which is offered by various government agencies. Why we need to think about government grant at the so early stage? That is simply because the application of the grant, they have some period. Okay, if once you miss the golden period, you may lose the eligibility to apply for the relevant grant. Okay, so even though for some existing businesses, I will still encourage you, before you start or you plan for any investment opportunity or any expansion plan, try to explore whether there is any government grant which is eligible for your activity, which whereby you are going to carry out. Otherwise, you will lose the opportunity to apply for the relevant grant again. Okay, so before I start to discuss about the grant, I probably want to share with you for some of the government agency which is offer some government grant. But of course, you look at my slide here, there are only 5 government agency. Okay, in fact, there are approximately about 14 government agencies. They offer various type of grant. Okay, I'm not going to share with you for all of them. I will just share with you for those grants offered by the 5 government agencies, which I list down here. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is MIDA. MIDA stands for Malaysian Investment Development Authority. I guess some of the participants also heard about that when you apply for tax incentive, like for example, pioneer status, investment tax allowance, automation capital allowance, or even green technology. You will heard about MIDA name. It's very famous because they promote manufacturing, and service sector. Okay, but on top of this, on top of the tax incentive you can apply from MIDA, they also offer certain type of grant, which I will share with you in detail later. The other agency I'm going to talk about is MDEC. MDEC stands for Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. Some of you also may heard about this MDEC name before, because MDEC, the most famous incentive offered by MDEC is MSc status. Okay, if let's say you are involved in digital economy, then MDEC is quite common for you, because they will provide a lot of guidance for you to apply for the relevant type of tax incentive. But don't forget, other than tax incentive, MDEC also offers some grant, which is specifically for digital economy. Other than MDEC and MIDA, MATRADE is another government agency, offer different type of grant. If let's say the business entity or a company, they would like to explore whether they can expand their business to global market. So they may need to consider to take up the grant offered by MATRADE, because the grant, you can use this up to participate in some international exhibition. You can claim the relevant expenses, which I will share with you in detail shortly. The fourth government agency I'm going to talk about is MOTIS, which stands for Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. And some of you also may heard about it before, MOTIS. MOTIS is helping on commercialize of research and development activity. Okay. Why research and development is so important? Because if without the research and development, you cannot come up with a new product or even the new type of services. Okay, so in order to encourage the business entity to carry out more R&D, MOTIS is helping them to commercialize, means they can become the business for the company. Okay, instead of just this is one of something like a dream for the company, they will make it realize. And the last government agency I'm going to share with you is MTDC, Malaysian Technology Development Corporation. MTDC encourage the local company to adopt technology in their business operation. Okay. Along the way, when I share with you the government grant, then you can see that what is the function of the government agency, whereby I share with you just now. I will move on. There are many different types of government grant, and they have they actually have different type of purposes before they come up with the grant and offer by the government agency, whereby I mentioned to you earlier. I segregate to 6 types. Okay, and here for those government grant offered by the government agency, as I mentioned earlier, the first one is startup. When you just started your businesses, you can consider to get the grant, but of course, like I mentioned, don't miss the golden period when you can apply or submit your application to the relevant government agency. The second one is when you want to expand your business or you want to improve your business operation, then you can consider this type of grant. Export, like I mentioned, MATRADE is the one who offer a lot of financial assistance in terms of helping you to export your product or services to overseas. R&D activity encouraged by MOTIS, like I mentioned, because MOTIS always help the company or the business entity to commercialize their R&D activity. Automation or digitalization. This is also another area. If let's say you want to automate your business operation, the agency, they offer various type of government grant for you to submit your application. Once you've gotten it, it will really help you to improve your businesses, at the same time to ease your cash flow. The last one is technology, which means if, let's say, the business entity, they would like to adopt the technology, a certain type of special technology in their business operation, they can also look into this type of government grant offered by the government agency. Okay, I will move on. Before I discuss in detail about the government grant offered by various government agencies, let's take a look what is the definition of government grant. From here, you can see that government grant basically is the financial award, okay, given by federal, state, or local government authority for a beneficial project. Of course, on top of where the government would like to offer you certain financial assistance, they always will see whether there is any benefit, okay, from your project can bring to the nation. If, let's say, this is a high impact project, then they will encourage you to carry on and offer you certain grant. Okay, please bear in mind, on top of you have the dream to commercialize your project, it will also, you need to think about whether there is any benefits to the country, because before the government agency can offer you certain grant, they will think from the nationwide point of view whether there is any advantage they can take from your project. Okay, of course, government grant does not include technical assistance or any financial assistance. Okay, for example, like loan guarantee, interest rate subsidy, or even revenue sharing. And most of the time, the grantee, which means the recipient, is not expected to repay the money. Okay, they expect to use the fund from the grant for the approved purposes. Okay, let's move on to the type of grant. Just now I mentioned the first type is the startup grant. And the first grant I'm going to share with you is from MTDC, okay, Business Startup Fund. This fund basically is applicable for the companies, the early stage technology-based company registered with SCCM, which means this must be incorporated under CCM. Okay, it must be a technology base. You can see the two conditions here. Firstly, is a incorporated company and must be technology based for the startup businesses, and they must have a high Malaysian shareholding up to at least 70%. Okay, they basically provide to the scalable and viable technology-based early stage company. And they must be able to achieve the business goal and matching the business standard. Of course, the funding is up to how much? The volume, it will be up to 5 million or 90% of the total project cost. Please bear in mind, 5 million, funding is up to 5 million or 90% of the total project cost, whichever is lower. Okay, but don't forget, this government grant is need to repay, because this is a repayable grant. You must be repaid within 6.5 years. They have some term and condition. For MTDC, they always assist the technology-based company to commercialize their technology activity, but through a strategic partnership. Okay, which means they have a special arrangement. Like here, you need to repay, but how they fund you? The flexible funding will be through the convertible promissory notes, which means they will hold some equity. Okay, that's why they call it strategic partnership arrangement. In terms of the term and conditions, need to negotiate with MTDC before they can finalize the funding. Okay. The second type of government grant for startup businesses whereby you can consider is offering by CRADLE. In fact, the full name of CRADLE is CRADLE Fund Sdn Bhd. CRADLE Fund Sdn Bhd is incorporated by MOTIS, okay, and this CRADLE Fund Sdn Bhd is promoting the R&D activity as well. Okay, they're also helping on commercialize the R&D activity, especially for those entities that must own the IP right. Okay, they are using the CRADLE Innovation Program, okay, to fund and guide the business entity so that they can commercialize their R&D activity. For this fund, it is eligible for various business entity, either it's individual or even a proper business setup. Because you look at the eligibility here, I list down, like for example, Malaysian, which is an individual, non-Malaysian, also an individual, private limited company, LLP, and even enterprise. Of course, there are some conditions you need to meet before you can submit your application. Must ensure that the entity is in operation less than 5 years. If let's say already in operation more than 5 years, you will lose the eligibility. You can't submit, even you submit application, they may reject the application. Okay, the revenue must not more than 3 million, and the corporate shareholding is less than 25%. It looks like this government grant is more support towards the individual. Okay, or I would say that is not the company type, and majority of the employee must be Malaysian, which means your employee must be majority is Malaysian, not foreign worker. And of course, like I mentioned just now, for those entity have IP right. This is one of the conditions for most of the government grant offered by CRADLE. You must own the IP right. And of course, this is a conditional grant. The objective, like I mentioned, is for commercialize the technology startup. Okay, the funding can be up to 150,000 within 18 months, which means they will pay you throughout the 18 months. Okay, they will support not only with the funding, but they also provide the business networking opportunity and also other value-added services. Okay, like for example, consultation. How they disperse the money? They will give you an advance payment up to a certain amount, and the rest will be on reimbursement basis. And in summary, okay, for business startup fund, this is a repayment grant, like I mentioned. Funding up to 5 million and offered by MTDC. CIP Spark offered by CRADLE Fund Sdn Bhd. Okay, the funding's up to 150,000, and this is a conditional grant. Okay, so I move on to the second type of government grant. If let's say your business entity is going to expand the business, improve the business operation, probably you can look at this type of grant. The first type of grant under this category, I'm going to share with you Industry Forward Intervention Fund offered by MITI. In fact, this Industry Forward Intervention Fund at first is offered by MIDA. Okay, why now become MITI? Because the fund allocated to MIDA already fully utilized. So according to MIDA, if you want to submit your application for this government grant, you have to submit your application through the MITI website. Okay, and this is a matching grant. They will pay you based on whatever the eligible expenditure you have incurred, up to a maximum amount of 500,000 per company. And the project must be completed within 12 months. They give you a timeline. Okay, your approved project must be completed within 12 months. from the date of the approval letter issued by MIDA. Okay, and you must ensure that the project able to improve the productivity of company. What are the eligible expenditure you can claim back from MITI? It must be based on the recommendation of the RA report. RA here is not reinvestment allowance. The RA here basically is the Industry Forward Readiness Assessment Program. So before you can submit your application to MITI, means that you must undergo or participate in the Industry Forward Readiness Assessment Program under MIDA or MITI. Sorry, it should be MITI. So you have to undergo this program. After that, when they give you the report and together with the recommendation, then you can submit your application. Okay, based on, let's say, based on the recommendation, they actually recommend you to improve certain business operation, but that you need the fund to either buy certain machine or even certain software. Then all this you have to present to MITI, okay, when you submit your application. Of course, there is some exclusion list you have to take note. Like for example, you are not allowed to use this fund to purchase of rental of land, building, vehicle, and furniture, to do the renovation, to become the loan for other people, to promote the activity, become part of your operation expenditure, R&D, or even working capital. Those are the exclusion lists whereby you are not allowed to use the fund for these purposes. Okay. Before you can submit application, of course, you need to assess whether you can meet the condition under this government grant. Firstly, it must be a company incorporated in Malaysia, at least 60% equity, okay, held by Malaysian, must be having a valid registration and business license, and please don't forget it is eligible for the SME in the manufacturing and related service sector. Okay, because don't forget, MIDA is the entity or promote manufacturing and related service sector. So the government grant seems go to the same purpose. It will be offered to the similar industry as well. Okay, and the company must be in operation for at least 3 years. If let's say your company in operation less than 3 years, even you submit the application, they may reject your application. So all the condition, please take note, you must meet the condition before you submit your application. Okay. Of course, there's also another condition you need to watch out. The application must be submit, okay, within 2 months after you obtain the RA report. Okay. So I move on to another government grant offered by MTDC, not MITI anymore, okay, Business Growth Fund. Like I mentioned, MTDC always offer the grant for technology-based company. Just now, the type is for the startup company, and now is for those growing technology-based company. And they also mentioned you must be a company registered with CCM. The shareholding must be 75% of Malaysian, and the revenue, okay, must be more than 1.5 million, okay, and not in the loss position. If the company is growing but is in a loss-making position, I'm afraid you submit your application, they may reject your application. Okay. The objective of this government grant basically is enhance the internal preparedness and corporate governance, and the funding can up to 10 million. They will pay you within 5 years. Of course, MTDC always fund the business entity through the strategic partnership program. Okay. Under this business growth fund, they will fund you through equity funding by using the redeemable convertible preference share. So this is quite different from other type of government grant. Okay, they fund you through the equity. So in summary, the first type, industry forward intervention fund, like I mentioned, this is a matching grant, but the business growth fund is the conditional grant. Okay, can be up to 10 million. The funding is huge, but through equity funding offered by MTDC, which means you somehow have to sign certain agreement with them. Okay, I move on. The third type of activity for export, okay, for government grant, if let's say you want to carry out export activity and expand your business to global market, probably you can consider this the grant offered by especially by MATRADE, because MATRADE is the agency like to encourage the local company to become more global competitiveness. So they will encourage the local company to promote their Malaysian product or their services to the foreign customer. Okay, the first time I'm going to share with you is Service Export Fund offered by MATRADE. And this grant is a reimbursable grant. You must incur first, which means you incur, then you reimburse. But of course, before you incur, you must be obtain the approval from MATRADE. And don't forget, for those business entity, if you would like to submit your application of government grant to MATRADE, you must register with them. Okay, this is one of the basic conditions you must take note. You must register with them. And this service export fund eligible to all service sector, but there is an exclusion except tourism, real estate, banking, and insurance. Like I mentioned, please watch out the condition. It must be a company incorporated under CCM, okay, or Malaysian professional recognized by professional authority, or incorporated under Cooperative Society Act 1993. In terms of equity, it must be at least 60% Malaysian owned, okay, and it must be in operation at least 1 year, which means if let's say this is a new company, just started the business, but less than 1 year, you can't apply for this service export fund. Okay, and please take note, the export service or product, it must be made in Malaysia. Okay, and like I mentioned, you must register with MATRADE before you are allowed to submit the application for this government grant. In summary, they are basically service export fund have 12 activity whereby you can submit, because although in totality you can apply up to few million government grant, but it will be based on what kind of activity you're going to carry out. So for MATRADE, they already list down 12 activity, approved activity you can submit your application for this government grant. Okay, like for example, as a provider of services of international event held overseas, okay, your traveling expenses to international destination for tender project, okay, and conduct presentation to potential client, rendering services for project undertaken in overseas, but conduct a feasibility study used to be the highest funding they have. If let's say you are going to conduct a feasibility study, okay, for a specific international project, temporarily they already suspended for application. Okay, not so sure by when they will reopen again for registration. Okay, other than this, there are some other activity like procurement of commercial intelligence or market report, participation fee for training program, and so on, whereby you can take note. Those are the business activity, especially for service sector. If let's say you meet the requirement, always can submit your application to MATRADE. I move on. Other than services, if let's say you are Malaysian brand product, they also offer market development grant. Okay, for you to promote your product. Of course, this grant is also another type of reimbursable grant, okay? You can claim up to 300,000 and you must submit the reimbursement within 30 calendar days from the last day of the promotion activity. What is the promotion activity? It must be the internationally recognized trade promotion activity, which means you participate in the international exhibition held on a web platform or even a virtual trade investment mission and export acceleration mission. For those expenditure you incur, like for example, participation fee, boot rental, air fee, accommodation, and listing fee, you can submit your invoices to claim back from MATRADE. Let's say you already gotten the approval from MATRADE under this market development grant. Of course, please watch out, there are some conditions you need to meet. This is a grant applicable to SME, professional service provider, trade and industry association, chamber of commerce, or professional body cooperative. Okay, 60% owned, Malaysian owned, at least you have to meet also, and you are the one who manufacture the product that is made in Malaysia or export the Malaysia services. And of course, there are some other criteria. You may refer to the guideline because I cannot list out everything here. Like I mentioned, you must register with MATRADE before you can submit your application. During the Pemekasan announcement, in fact, this grant has been increased to 500,000, but based on the information published in MATRADE website, the amount is still 300,000. So we still have to wait for the changing or updating on the information by MATRADE later on. I move on. The third type of government grant, which is also helping in promotion of a product or services, is for the mid-tier company development program offered by MATRADE as well. Okay, what is mid-tier company? Mid-tier, you need to watch out the definition. Let's say you are the manufacturing company, you must ensure your annual revenue is equal to either 50 million but up to 500 million. But for other sectors, it's from 20 million up to 500 million. Every year, only 50 mid-tier companies will be selected by MATRADE. Okay, they will go through customized programs and help them to promote their business activity. Okay, before you can take part, please watch out the criteria set out by MATRADE. You must make sure you have a positive growth in the past 2 years, involved in high impact sector, at least 60 Malaysian owned, and have experience or currently exporting. Okay, which means currently you're already doing that. Now with their help, you can even improve your business activity. Okay, and of course, there will some expectation from MATRADE. Let's say they offer you this government grant. You must be willing to bear the auxiliary expenses. You fully committed, okay, and also willing to share the company's specific information, which means you must be able to share your business activity with MATRADE. Okay, and how is the program? And what is so-called the mid-tier company development program? This program basically broaden the mid-tier company to reach the high potential market. Okay, they also provide tailored business advice to mid-tier company, provide access to funding, and also introduction to new technology, which means MATRADE, let's say see there is a requirement for you to adopt certain technology, okay, they will introduce to you if you undergo the program with them. In summary, okay, like you look at here, the Service Export Fund in the past, you can claim up to a few million but because they suspend one of the activity which can offer up to 3 million, now drop to 1.3 million. And this is a matching grant. Market development grant is a reimbursable grant and offer up to 300,000. But meanwhile, we are waiting for them to increase up to 500,000. And the last one is the mid-tier company development program. This is basically a consultation program, and there is considered a partial program. Let's say the mid-tier company selected by MATRADE, they will have to undergo the program and they will guide them along to improve their businesses. Okay. I move on to research and development. In fact, most of the grant I can, based on my observation, they encourage R&D activity. Even for those tax incentives offered by our Malaysian government, they always encourage the business activity to carry out R&D, okay, whether it's for their services or even for their products. Let's take a look some of the government grant offer to help up on the business R&D activity. The first one is offered by MOTIS, Apply Innovation Fund, okay? And this fund is quite popular because they applicable for individual, sole proprietor, partnership, LLP, registered association, and cooperative and NGO. Because you look at it, most of the government grant they offer to a company, but for this particular Apply Innovation Fund, they offer to individual, which means let's say your businesses is still very, very small, but you need some fund to expand the business and carry out some R&D. These are the funds eligible for you and help you to commercialize your R&D activity. Okay, the project, don't forget the project must contain element of technology innovation. So you can't run away. It must be technological innovation, must be innovative enough to be commercialized. Either it's a product, a process, a system, or even an innovative services. Don't forget, it only applicable to Malaysian only. The objective of this Apply AIF, in short, to increase the innovator participation in innovative activity, which is government encourage, okay, our Malaysian to become more innovative, to come out with our own product. So they also help to can help to promote the technological innovation, okay, in terms of the new product, process, system, or services like I mentioned. Okay, with their help, most likely, because before they can accept your application, they most likely will go through certain assessment to see whether your idea is commercial potential. Okay, not all the project will be accepted by them. They will carry out their own assessment before they accept your application. And other criteria have to take note is the development of new product, process, or system, or even the IP right must be able to benefit your customer, the businesses, and even the society. So you must able to prove there is some advantages of the product. It must be benefit the nationwide. And don't forget, when you can apply your submit your application, they will have 1 to 9 level for them to assess you by MOTIS. Okay, level 1 is basically you come out with the principle within your ideal. You can present to them, but for application of this government grant, you must achieve at least the 2nd level, which means you already have your plan, how you want to go about it. Okay, then only you can submit your application to MOTIS. And the project must be executed in Malaysia. They also encourage you to collaborate with public or even private higher education institution, because it will even increase the chances of commercialize the R&D activity rather than you carry out on your own. The funding can be up to 500,000 within 12 to 18 months. Okay, I move on. The other government grant whereby I'm going to talk about is Strategic Research Fund, okay, also offered by MOTIS. And this Strategic Research Fund, you need to meet some condition before you can submit application. Like you have to check whether you are the entity as listed here. Whether you are the SME, you are the startup company, you are the multinational company, or you even is a large company, government research institute, public and private institution of higher learning, polytechnics and community college, ministry or government agency, or even the statutory body. Okay, it looks like this strategy research fund can be applied by multi-business entity. Okay, and I don't know whether you notice, many types of government grant they offer to SME. Okay, not to say they are biased, but they encourage or they try to help out SME to expand the business, okay, and improve their business operation. And other criteria you need to watch out is you must be a company registered under CCM Malaysia, more than 50% of Malaysian owned, and the pay up capital at least 10,000. Not eligible for 2 ringgit company, okay, at here, at least 10,000 pay up capital, must have 2 company director, and the business must be technology based. The company also must be in operation not more than 5 years. So that's why I always mention, for certain grant, you need to watch out the golden period. If let's say you want to apply, but you are in operation for more than 5 years, you may lose the eligibility to apply for this strategic research fund. If let's say, other than this rule, everything, other criteria, all you can meet, okay? And the objective of this grant basically is encourage you to carry out the research on the new technology, the process, the innovative product, the value add for technology or existing product, okay? And even have please bear in mind, your idea must have a high impact on community and economy. And it must be able to provide the solution for Malaysian grand challenges, MGC in short, and strategy issue of country. So if let's say you can help the country to resolve certain strategy issue, you most likely can get the approval from MOTIS, okay? And other than this, you may need to watch out, like I mentioned, you must achieve certain technology readiness level as determined by MOTIS. Like here, you must be at least is from level 2, which means you already come up with your proposal, not only the idea, it must be the proposal as well, okay? Project must be executed in Malaysia, and the implementation and monitoring by appointed agency. The funding can even up to 15 million, very attractive, within 36 months, which means it's 3 years, the funding can up to 15 million. So by way of look at it, this strategy research fund can cater for big project, okay? And apply innovation fund, it looks like can usually offer to those R&D activity, but it's a smaller scale, okay? So I move on to another category of government grant, automation or digitalization. The first one I'm going to share with you is Smart Automation Grant offered by MDEC, okay? In fact, MDEC and MIDA, they also have Smart Automation Grant. Just the industry, they offer to different industry and they have a different condition for you to meet. So you have to watch out before you submit your application. You have to consider which is the type is more suitable for you. If let's say MDEC, please bear in mind, they promote digital economy. So for them, they usually, it will be more involving the service sector. Like here they mention, applicable to general service sector and professional service sector. Okay. For those company incorporated in Malaysia, at least 51% equity. From just now, I mentioned about many types of government grant. Until now, you can observe that they are having different percentage of Malaysian equity. Can be up to 75% or even lower to 25%. Here, you must at least 51% Malaysian owned. If let's say your equity, Malaysian equity is lower than this, you also cannot meet their requirement, and even you submit the application, most likely they will reject your application. And the payout capital at least 50,000, not a dormant company, no going concern issue, and you already enter into the contract or agreement with the technology partner. This government grant basically is a matching grant, okay, and they can fund up to 50% of the total project cost, up to a limit of 200,000, whichever is lower, and the project must be implementation within a month. Okay, after the implementation, they will have a 3 months monitoring period so that you can achieve the project outcome. The expenditure for you to claim under this government grant is, for example, like cost of IT hardware, IT equipment, because they encourage you to digitalize your business activity, cost of software, license fee, process redesign, testing and certification costs, okay, and even the training costs associated to the project you're going to carry out. Of course, there are some expectation from MDEC you have to take note, okay. You must able to prove that the revenue of your company is increased, there are some saving in the business cost, process time cycle reduced, which means the lead time reduced, the man hours reduced, and also there are some new source of growth. It's somehow you must show the company is growing. Of course, temporarily, the application for this government grant is closed until further notice by MDEC. Okay, I move on. There's another type of a smart automation grant offered by MIDA, and the funding is even higher, up to 1 million. This is also a matching grant, okay, and the project for this smart automation, under this smart automation grant, is longer, up to 12 months from the date of the approval letter issued by MIDA. And those expenditure, like for example, you incur for automation machine, equipment, or software that will be used directly in your value chain of manufacturing and service activity, you will be able to claim, okay, by using this grant from MIDA. Of course, you need to watch out certain conditions. Your company must be incorporated in Malaysia, 51% equity, Malaysian owned, okay. You must have a valid business license, and you also have to engage, okay. They specifically mention there are some activity or certain industry eligible for this smart automation grant offered by MIDA, which include manufacturing activity and service activity regulated by specific act, regulation, or governed by relevant ministry or agency. Of course, they also specifically mention it is only eligible for SME and MTC only, and company in operation at least a year. So you must in operation more than a year, then you can apply, submit your application. Okay. They also have another condition, which means they will, before you can submit your claim, MIDA will provide you the committed deliverable, which means what you have to achieve before you can submit, okay, your claim. So of course, temporarily this application also closed, effective from 1st of June last year until further notice by MIDA. So from time to time, you have to check with various government agency whether the government grant is open for registration. Okay. There's another type of a government grant, but the grant amount is pretty small, up to 5,000. Okay. And they are open up to 100,000 application. Okay. And this SME digitalization grant, they announced during the Permekasa time, which means during the pandemic time, they come up with new government grant offer to SME. Of course, that is only one application per SME. Okay. And you can use the fund, which means, let's say you incur the expenditure on like for example payroll system, digital marketing or sales procurement system, or even ERP or any accounting and taxation system, then you can submit your application and get back the 5,000 from MDEC. The application process is pretty simple, okay, because this is a small grant. Of course, you have to watch out, like I mentioned, there are some criteria you have to meet, because you must be classified as a SME or cooperative, and the SME must be at least 60% Malaysian owned, must be in operation at least 6 months, and also must have a minimum average annual sales turnover of 50,000. There's some condition you have to meet, although this is a small grant and you can apply through Bank Simpanan Nasional. Prior to March 2022, the application for this SME digitalization grant was closed before. They only open up by end of March. Okay, so you can try to apply. Let's say you can meet the criteria, or you in the past you are not aware, but now you know about it. You can try to apply for this SME digitalization grant from MDEC website. In summary, like I mentioned, those grants offered by either MDEC or MIDA are matching grant, and the funding can up to 1 million. Okay, but of course, like I mentioned, you have to meet all the requirements before you can submit your application. Okay, in terms of technology, you can also, if let's say you're going to adopt some new technology, you also can consider other type of government grant. Let's take a look. The first type offered by MIDA, Domestic Investment Strategy Fund. This is also another type of matching grant offered by MIDA, and the fund can be up to 1 million, okay, per company, mainly for you to upgrade the machinery, increase your R&D activity, upskill your talent through training initiative, and even the international certification of the product. What are those expenditure you can claim for this government under this government grant? If let's say you incur the training of Malaysian, the R&D, like I mentioned, because you need to increase the R&D activity, modernization and upgrading the facility, you obtain the international certification, or even licensing or purchasing of new or high technology, which means they encourage you to adopt new technology in your business process. But of course, you need to watch out. Okay, some condition you have to meet. 60% Malaysian owned. Okay, you must be engaged in, if let's say you are the new company, you involve in manufacturing and service sector. If you are the existing company, you must be proof to them you are involving in reinvestment project, like for example expansion, modernization and diversification. And this is only applicable for strategy products, which means they have a high impact to the country. I have listed down here those promoted activity under the manufacturing and even the service industry. Okay, if let's say you fall under this category, then you can and meet all the conditions, and you also going to carry out the activity as mentioned here, then you can try to apply for this domestic investment strategy fund. But of course, temporarily the application is closed until further notice by MIDA. Okay, I move on. There is another type of government grant. If for you to consider, if let's say you're going to adopt a new technology, Industry Forward Domestic Investment Strategy Fund. This is also a matching grant and also can help you to upgrade your technological capability. Okay, and what are those expenditure you can claim? Okay, this also similar to another government grant offered by MIDA. You must be based on the recommendation under the RA report. RA report, like I mentioned, is the Industry Forward Readiness Assessment. You must undergo the program. Then based on the recommendation, you can apply for this grant. Okay, of course, you have to carry out the qualifying activity before you can consider a applicant who can meet their requirement. Like for example, you must be involved in this kind of activity before you proceed for the sub-application. And other than this, you must also meet the condition, okay, imposed by MIDA, like 60% Malaysian owned, you have a valid business license, and you involve in manufacturing and related service sector. Okay, like I mentioned, you must complete the Industry Forward Readiness Assessment RA program. And as usual, your application must be submitted within 2 months after you attempt the report. Okay, and of course, the purpose of this government grant is encourage those R&D activity, the training activity, and modernization and upgrading of facility. Okay, the application is temporarily closed until further notice. Okay, at here, this will be the last government grant I'm going to share with you, offered by MTDC. It's called Technology Acquisition Fund. Okay, this is specifically offered to SME as defined by National SME Development Council. And for the company SME who involved in this industry, like for example, agriculture and forestry, biotechnology, engineering and technology, and even medical and health science, natural science. For those company, you want to submit application, you must be incorporated under SSM, at least 50% Malaysian owned, you have a technology, okay, from the priority technology cluster, which means somehow approved by MOTIS, and the technology must be registered with proven and significant sales of volume. Okay, the technology provider, which means because for this technology acquisition fund is for you to acquire the technology from foreign country. So you must not have any relationship with the technology provider. So if let's say the technology provider is also the owner, then you cannot submit the application. Okay. Please take note the objective of this technology acquisition fund is for you to acquire the foreign technology for immediate incorporation into your manufacturing activity. Okay. They also want to avoid expensive and risky technology for the development stage, and you also encourage the acquisition of IP, okay, through the licensing technology, the outright purchase of the technology. Instead of you develop yourself, this will be the faster way because you can incorporate the technology, the new technology, straight away into your business activity. This funding is up to 4 million, okay, but watch out, you must repay within 4 years after 2 years implementation of the technology. After you implementation, you adopt the technology, 2 years later, you have to start to repay the government grant given or offered by MTDC. So most of, like I mentioned, most of the government grant offered by MTDC is through the strategic partnership. Okay, there will be a special arrangement, but of course the funding can be quite huge because most of the funding by MTDC is few million. And there are two categories. If let's say you are acquire the licensing technology, the funding can be up to 2.8 million or 70% of the eligible expenses, whichever is lower. and also the purchase of equipment from the technology provider. So let's say you need to also, on top of the technology, you need to acquire the equipment from the technology provider. The funding can be up to 1.2 million or even 50% of the eligible expenses, whichever is lower. So in summary, let's say you want to adopt a new technology, you may consider these 3 types of government grant, okay? Especially offered by MIDA, because those grants offered by MTDC, either you have to repay because they somehow will impose certain condition, or they will go through equity funding, which means eventually you still have to repay whatever the grant. Just you can make use of the fund without any interest incurred. Like for example, let's say you get a loan, you have to pay back the principal together with the interest amount. Yep. So that's all for my sharing on government grant. Before I end my session, I would like to share with you a little bit more about the tax treatment on government grant. Okay. For government grant, basically, when a company or even a business entity that receive or obtain the government grant from government agency, they are exempted under the income tax exemption order number 22, 2006, okay, which means whatever the subsidy or grant, as long as from the government, they will be exempted from tax at the gross income level. Of course, in order to match whatever the expenditure financed by the subsidy or the government grant, you are not eligible for deduction, which means let's say you use this for certain purposes, like for example, training, then you cannot claim these training expenses anymore. Okay. Same go to let's say you use the funding from the government, okay, to acquire certain capital expenditure, like for example, plant and machinery, then you also cannot qualify for capital allowance purposes. Although you can meet the requirement, this is one of the qualifying expenditure under the capital allowance rule. You also cannot claim for CA. And last, if usually the subsidy or grant, they will be exempt from tax when during the basic period when they are received. Okay, there's no such thing accrue. When you receive the actual receipt, then they will be either exempted or the expenditure when they incur financed through this grant, they will also either not allow for deduction or qualify for capital allowance purposes. Okay, that's all for my presentation today. I over back to you, Sean.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Woon. Yeah, okay. That's only a very small snapshot of some of the things that we can get from the government agencies. Okay. That's the point. Some of them are suspended. Some of them funds are already been done. It's very confusing. I understand that. And a lot of SMEs did not or could not or didn't want to because it's just too complex, didn't know where to go. What we really need is someone like yourself, Crow, as the so-called one-stop shop. If an SME comes and say, all right, this is my business, this is what I want to do. Is there any grants for me? And you would be able to advise, would you?
Yes, yes. What usually we do is, let's say someone approach us, we will help them to do the assessment because we somehow have our own database. We will go through because the database from time to time we will update it. If let's say this grant is eligible, then we will inform the client. If let's say it's not eligible at the moment, then we will tell the client probably have to come back once they open for registration again. So on top of this, if let's say for some of the company, we know that on top of the grant, they cannot get the grant at the moment. We probably will propose to them some tax incentive because you can see from here, those government agency, they are not only offer government grant like MDEC, MIDA, they also offer various type of a tax incentive, which is also very useful for all the business entity. as long as they can meet the requirement. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I've got some more some questions here. Two of them are I think you have also answered it in your presentation.
Yes.
It's about the grant, SMEs and mid-tier. I think it's already covered some of them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then it's about wellness and health. I think you did mention something there, right?
Yes. But of course, because different type of grant, they will not specifically mention about which sector they only can apply. You see, like for example, even MIDA, they only mention about the service sector or even manufacturing. So they will not specifically mention this is for wellness, this is for health industry. No, you have to come forward. They will check whether this is the industry whereby can meet the requirement. I will recommend the company, you check whether you can meet other requirements first or not. Because it looks like the government grant is a little bit different from tax incentive, because this tax incentive always they emphasize on promoted activity. But government grant itself, they never mention similar things in their condition. Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's a further clarification that say, how do you define SME or mid-tier company? I mean, is there like when you say eligibility is for SME and MTC, what they need to be certified or?
Actually, no. You can look at it. The SME, they can be different from this government agency to another government agency, because usually in either in their website or in their publication, they will mention this SME as defined, for example, like by SME Corp. So you have to refer back to the SME website. What is the definition of the SME? Or any like for example, I think just now they also mentioned under MATRADE. MATRADE have their own definition of SME. And they mentioned about, like for example, mid-tier company, they have a definition in manufacturing is 50 million up to 500 million, the turnover. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I also was a bit confused, because I came across applications that mentions things like, it sounded like in order to prove that you are SME, you have to get some certification from SME Corp or something like that.
As far as I know, because they only mention about the criteria. But for SME Corp, I only understand, let's say, for example, you want to apply for certain special tax deduction. Yes, you have to get the cert from them.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't deny some of the government agency, they may require you to do so. You have to get the confirmation from the SME Corp to a certain particular date to mention that you are the SME.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it will be different from one agency to another agency. That's why the procedure, whether you are familiar with the procedures and also you understand whether there is any pitfall, that is very important. So I understand that it's not so easy for the business entity when they submit their own application, because you have to go through a lot of hassle.
Okay. Another question that came in is that we are recipient for Industry Forward Intervention Fund. It's a matching grant. I think you also mentioned the tax consideration for this, right? Can we claim capital allowance for the remaining amount?
Let's say your you bought a qualifying expenditure, what you have incurred is 4 million, but your grant is only up to 2 million. The balance usually you can claim.
Should be right.
Yes, you are right. But the 2 million you can claim.
And then for mid-tier companies, what are the grants available for manufacturing? I think you covered that too, right?
Yeah. For MIDA, especially MIDA, because MIDA offer quite many things to manufacturing company, they don't really classify you as a mid-tier company. Either it's SME or non-SME. So long you meet the requirement. But of course, currently MIDA, honestly, there are not many government grant is open for registration, except the one I mentioned, intervention investment fund. But you can only apply through MITI, but not MIDA.
Oh yes, because
Yes.
shifted.
Yes.
Okay, there's something which I want to pick your brains whether you are aware of this. This is in regards to your MDGs, the marketing development grant, right? And it's given to individual companies that do that. Earlier this year, MATRADE has come up with something called the Empower Trade Association grant. Okay, and that's what I think you pointed out to, is also like sort of matches the MDG. It's a $500 million per year. But the problem is this: the ETA, the Empower Trade Association grant, they are only giving 70% of the expenses. Okay, and the expenses does not. Okay, they are trying to encourage chambers of commerce and business association in organizing trade missions. Okay.
Yeah.
But they don't cover flights and accommodations, all right, for the ETA grant. Yeah. So my question would be is that if, let's say I'm the Chamber of Commerce, I did a mission and I claim, I mean, I've got approval for the ETA. So I pay for the exhibition, the booths and stuff like that, right? And then the delegates, which are my members, will pay for the airfares and then the accommodation, blah, 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 as they fly over there, right? Now, would then the delegates that came aboard my ETA will be able to apply the MDG to cover the airfares and accommodations, since the ETA does not cover flights and accommodation?
What I understand, usually they are like that because the to be honest, I don't have the experience apply like what you have mentioned, the one. But usually when they offer you certain grant, when you try to apply for another grant, they somehow may not accept. This is what I understand, because even for some of the grant recipient, you apply a certain grant before, then when you second round will come to apply, but for other type of project, they may not really favorable to you anymore. This is what I can observe. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, contrary to what you say, yes, there's some merits to it. But if I read it correctly, the reason why the ETA does not cover airfare and accommodation is because the MDG already covered. So maybe it is in, I mean, we can't talk on behalf of MATRADE, but
yes,
it looks like they are saying that we won't cover accommodations and flights in ETA because the delegates can claim through the MDG anyway. So I think maybe that's the good news, you know.
Yeah.
But
because you are right, because I have seen some of the condition for other type of grant. Let's say you apply certain grant before, then they want to know what is the reason you apply for this grant before they grant you the approval. So somehow or other they are quite strict in terms of this. But MATRADE is one of the government agency whereby when I approach them, they are very friendly. Actually, they always encourage you, come to us, if let's say you have this and that. And you can look at the even the service export fund, they actually cover quite many things. Yep. I think other than the MDG, probably you also can explore this service export fund.
The MDG, to be able to qualify, you have to be, they call it a member of MATRADE or something like that.
Yes, you must register as a member with them. Otherwise, you cannot log into their system.
Okay. How difficult is it to be a member of MATRADE?
Actually, you just provide the information like for example, maybe your company numbers and all this, it's not that difficult to become the members.
Okay, online
Yes.
application like that.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah,
You are right.
Okay.
Because most of the government agency, to be honest, you can apply through the website nowadays. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, we don't have any more questions. I think if there are any more lingering clarifications, I guess you can get in touch with either CRO or MICCI, and we'll just forward those queries to CRO lah. Okay,
Sure.
after this, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So before we go, just about almost 1.5 hours. Last parting takeaways from you, Dr. Boon?
Yeah, I want to share with all the participants, every time before you want to submit the application for any government grant, please just take a few minutes to give them a call, because even though for us, we will always have to check from time to time whether the government grant is available. This is first thing you have to check, because even let's say you can meet all the requirements, but it's not open for registration, you can't do anything. So it will be still better from time to time you give a call to check with them, because they will not tell you in the website. Most of the government agency, they will not update. Not like MIDA, they will put there or already closed for registration since when. But others, they most likely they will just silent.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay, one last thing I forgot about this, and it's a story I told many times. I've seen one booklet that's produced. I can't remember whether it's MIDA or SFE Corp that lists all these grants, women thing, and all this kind of stuff. So it's still also very confusing. I was just wondering if anyone, maybe yourself, has got a very simple website where we can go into. There's a list of questions that you ask, you fill in the questionnaire, and then you can come up with Zoom and say, okay, some of these are possibilities in terms of grants.
What I understand,
it will be helpful for SMEs.
Yes, what I understand, so far there are quite many websites actually they summarize the condition, but it's still quite a lot. They are not put up all the condition, because if you see carefully, even like for the service export fund, the whole guideline itself if I'm not mistaken, 20 to 30 pages. So there is no one summarize the main point. Some of the website I also gone through before, they only put up these are for what kind of activity you can apply, up to how much, that's all. So I know what you mean, but currently yes, it's tough. For us, we have this kind of system for ourselves. But of course, if let's say the business entity need our help, probably they still have to push us. Then we will go into our database and tell them what are those relevant grants they can apply. Yeah.
Oh, just last minute one that came in. Yeah, I also did wonder about this requirement of Malaysian owned, right? The definition about it, right? For example, you have a joint venture, like a lot of my members are multinationals, they are foreign owned, but they may be some Malaysian owned, or it can be just like us, we are all corporate owned. That means there's no individuals. So if a foreign owned Malaysia registered shareholder in my company, does that mean they are, how do you define a Malaysian company? So you got to trace back to the holding company, the ultimate holding company. Is that how it looks like?
That will depends on because certain government grant, like for example MIDA, if I'm not mistaken, they will just trace back to 2 level up, which means from here we will check the immediate holding company and probably the intermediate company, whether they are fulfill the requirement or not.
So I guess it's majority, right? Yeah, I also don't know how you let's
Because
say
if you trace back all the way to ultimate, there are some honestly I don't think they are so strict until the extent. But of course, because some, let's say the group structure, they can up to even 10 levels. So it's very difficult that there must be, you must have some, you know, at least condition for people to check. It cannot be, this is quite different. Like, for example, we conduct the conflict of interest check. It's very different. We have to check all the way up to the ultimate holding company. Yep. And if you ask me, I would say different government agency, they somehow have their own practice. Even let's say, like, for example, IRB, if you ask them, what does you mean by Malaysian owned under the allowance of increased export? They will tell you this is referring to individual, Malaysian individual.
Yeah.
Even corporate shareholders, Malaysian company is also not considered. Yeah, you still have to go back to the respective government agency. How many level they want you to check?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
yep.
I was just wondering, like, if you have a situation where, let's say, you need 52% Malaysian owned, right? So let's say a company is applying for it and it's got one shareholder at, let's say, 40%, and then a foreign owned Malaysian registered company owning the other 60%. Now, if we go into that for so-called foreign company, then within that foreign company, it is also held by, let's say, 40% Malaysian. So if you, I don't know whether it takes into account, if you add the two together, it's very Malaysian, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. The calculation, I think, is quite similar when like when auditor, they calculate, you know, the percentage of the shareholding.
Yeah,
it's the same.
Okay.
The multiply
anyway,
effect.
That's another story for another day, I guess.
Yes.
Like that. All right. Thank you very much for everyone for watching. Please look out for the next very intriguing Crow MICCI Crow Expert Hour. Very off the cuff, straight business challenges that we throw at the experts, and then you can see very well they are very well versed with what they do. Have confidence that they will be there for you. Okay, right. See you guys next time. Bye. Thank you, Dr. Woon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.